Hey, everybody, it's Paul Larson. Find your voice as a leader, coach, author, and speaker. I want to talk to you today about feedback or feed forward and the unattended gift that can offer us sometimes. Taking you back a few years when I was head of HR at an organization, and I was in the midst of negotiating some training with some vendors to come into our organization and train our staff and our teams. And sometimes when you're talking about price and fees, things can get a little dramatic or emotional, and it can trigger certain reactions in some of us. So the vendor and I were in this midst of negotiating in terms of what we thought would be a fair price. I received an email from the vendor that they did not mean to send to me. They actually hit reply all in some of their internal conversations. And because I was already on the address list, I got the message. Well, in the midst of this message, when I was reading it, they called me, Paul, a prickly pear. And I was like, wow, I don't think I was meant to get this. And they called me a prickly pear. And all of a sudden, we go into that defensive posture. A prickly pear? What's a prickly pear? First of all, pears are not prickly, as far as I know. Pears are very smooth. They're very they have a certain shape, but I've never known them to be prickly. Immediately, we look to invalidate the feedback or invalidate what we perceive to be something that's not accurate, right? And so I went right to, they have the wrong fruit. There's no such thing as a prickly pear. There is such a thing as a prickly pear. Notice the similarities between this photograph and current state. Prickly pear. So there is such a thing as a prickly pear. In that moment, once I was able to take a breath, realized, of course, what had happened, I sat there for a moment and deconstructed prickly and pear. First of all, I thought, wow, a pear. Pear is unique. It's not kind of a mundane fruit or even an everyday fruit, right? Like an apple or orange or banana. It's kind of a unique fruit. It's used a lot in sophisticated and gourmet recipes. So as a fruit, a pear is like highly valued, and it is somewhat unique. Okay, so far so good. Now let's take the prickly part. Well, why would they perceive that me to be prickly? And when I looked at the scenarios that we had been involved in, the conversations, our communications back and forth, absolutely. I was being triggered a certain way because I was looking out for the organization. I was looking out for our money. I was looking at what was going to be best for the teams and the type of training. So naturally, when we get into sort of those types of discussions, yeah, I was probably getting triggered and I was probably coming off a little prickly. So when I looked at it and I had a chance to kind of sit with it for a minute, I was like, yeah, I am a prickly pear. And I own my prickliness and I own my pearness. Now, what was happening on the other side of that communication? They were scrambling because they realized what had happened and they had just called one of their potential partners, one of their potential clients who was going to do a lot of work with them, a prickly pear. So what I did was something that I thought was a lot of fun. We had a good laugh around it. I actually went to them and said, thank you very much for this. I'm not sure I can own the prickly pearness consistently, but when I look at leadership and I look at my legacy as a leader, and I look at the brand that I create as a leader, I can own that prickliness at that point in that scenario. What happens a lot of times, and this happens with me when I work with coaches and speakers and consultants and facilitators, I see people get feedback sometimes and immediately they run and they get into that defensive posture and then they look to invalidate the feedback. There's nothing to invalidate. Feedback is feedback. It's based on the person who's providing you that feedback. So it's their perception. There's nothing to invalidate or even validate. It's just to try to understand that worldview of the person that's giving you that feedback. I work with feedback all the time, or as I call feed forward. That's a term that's been utilized and coined by Marshall Goldsmith in his Stake Center coaching, which I'm certified in. When I work with my clients and we receive the feed forward data, We look at it and we look for trends. We deconstruct it. We do exactly what I did, except I didn't have that awareness many years ago when I received the prickly pear feedback. So next time you get feedback, whether it's intentional, i.e. you ask for it, or whether it's unintentional, i.e. it's a gift, look at it as feed forward. Look at it as, what does it mean to me? Is this something I can deconstruct? Is this something I can look and see and want as part of my legacy as a leader or my brand? And then go forward from there. And remember, whether you're an awesome apple or a beautiful banana or an overused orange, you can always be a prickly pear like me. So this is Paul Larson. If you're interested in some of my coaching programs or my leadership workshops, or having me come to speak at one of your on-site events, don't hesitate to call out to me, Paul at paulnlarson.com. Take care and enjoy your prickliness.